Very good. Thanks so much for having me, man.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. For the listeners who don't know who you are, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Tyler Westfall. I'm a member of the U.S. national team in kayak slalom. I'm also a coach for our lead developing club here in the U.S. and or development club here in the U.S. and and so I coach, I do personal training, and then I train myself.
Right. Tell us a little bit about your sport. How does it
Yeah,
work? I know there's kayak, there's canoeing, there's the flat water ones, there's
yeah,
the slalom ones. So give us an overview of those, I guess, paddling disciplines, if I may call them that, with
no,
all my, yeah, if that's the right term,
yeah.
and how they work, different distances, competitions, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's not a super well known sport over on this side of the pond in the U.S. and North America. Everybody thinks of kayaking; they think of recreational paddling. A lot of people think of sit on top boats, going out fishing on a lake or something. Maybe somebody's familiar with some whitewater kayaking, or they'll think that you do rafting. But if you think about, I think actually Instagram and TikTok have done a good job of promoting whitewater kayaking. There's a few people, a few paddlers like Dane Jackson and such that have just gotten have blown up a bit. So people know what like running waterfalls and whatnot is now. So that's more like the extreme recreation discipline. And then I do some of that as well. We actually just had an extreme race on our local waterfalls on Great Falls in the Potomac. That was pretty awesome that I got to participate in.
Yeah.
But my sport is the Olympic discipline of whitewater kayaking. So this is they have class 3-4 section of generally artificial white water in a man-made like loop structure. So lake at the bottom pumps water up to the top and then gravity fed down through the rapids.
Hmm.
And you have like a bunch of gates on the way down. So 18 to like 24 gates, which are essentially like two poles, like PVC poles hung from wires over the whitewater. And then the gates are either green or red. So the green gates you navigate through in the downstream direction, and the red gates you navigate through in the upstream direction.
Yeah.
That's a great example. What is that? Is that Rio? I think, or maybe
Think,
Tokyo.
let me see which one it is. I just found it looking up on Google. What does it say? Brazil? Is it possible?
Yeah, that was the Rio course. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, exactly. Right. So for people listening to the audio, go check out the YouTube video of the podcast. I've got an image pulled up here, and you can clearly see the down, and then you got the, I guess the up is just like you were
The
talking about,
pump
the water
structure.
being pumped up and pushed back down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we have two of these style of courses in the U.S. One in Oklahoma City and one in Charlotte, North Carolina. So
Yeah.
that's where we host most of our major competitions. We actually just had the Pan American Championships last year in Oklahoma City, and we'll be having the World Championships in Oklahoma City in 2025, I believe,
Hmm.
2025 or 2026, which is super exciting to bring some international competition back to North America, which is pretty cool.
I was gonna say it looks like the most fun water park.
Yes. Yeah. Like for people that are just going there to raft and whatnot, it's such an epic amusement park. It's super fun. Charlotte, North Carolina, actually, they have such a fantastic facility. They have high ropes courses, fantastic mountain biking trails, really good whitewater, and just kind of like everything outdoorsy. They've got like rock climbing, like out over a big pool, so you can
Yeah.
like fly into the water. They got everything. It's off the hook. It's super cool. But back to the discipline. So the sport is that you navigate through these gates. You have 6 gates are red. You have to navigate upstream. The rest are downstream. And they place the gates in. It's not random, but it's in a combination that you're not known to privy to, or that you're not privy to prior to the race. So it's kind of like for people that know the sport of ski slalom, it's the same way. Like they'll practice moves during their training, and then the day of the race, they have to just walk the course, look at it, visualize it, figure out how they're going to run it. And then the first time that they're actually practicing that set of combination of gates is the day of the race. And it's the
Wow.
same
Is,
thing for us.
is is there a practice run at all in the water, or?
I mean, you have tons of training in the water, and the gates are in random
but
combinations.
not in the exact position of the gates that you're going to find in the competition.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
I guess that's quite unique, because even on I mean, like you were saying, in skiing, you'll be able to just kind of shuffle down the course and look at it and everything. And I don't think that you can go all out to test it out.
No.
What does that change? I guess we'll come back to that after. I'll let you finish on the disciplines. I'll write my question down.
Yeah. Yes, the length of the event is usually in the realm of like 80 to 100 seconds. When you change the discipline, so you have kayak, which is sitting on your butt with a two-bladed paddle. It's like what we traditionally think of. And then canoe, like to the blind or like to the untrained eye, it looks very similar. The boat looks very, very similar. The only difference that you can see outside of the water is that they have a single-bladed paddle, canoe paddle, but they're actually sitting on their knees. So they have a much higher center of gravity than the kayaks. It's much more uncomfortable.
Is that why you picked the other one?
I don't do canoe. I couldn't do it, man. My knees would not allow me. No way. It's brutal.
Okay. So
and then we have this discipline for both men and for women. We used to have two-person canoe as an Olympic discipline, but they switched that out. Like initially, it was men had two-person canoe and kayak, and women had kayak. Okay. And now women have kayak and canoe, and men have kayak and canoe.
All right, so they took out the double. Was it not popular, or was it why did it go away?
It wasn't as popular within the sport. Like there weren't as many people doing it. I mean, there also weren't as many boats, but you still had two people in each boat. So there was that, part of the mathing it out. But it was really popular, like spectator-wise. Like I think it was probably the most fun discipline to watch. Okay. I mean, it's just really unique to see like two people working in tandem with these really complicated courses, doing the same courses that like these really technical courses that kayaks and canoes are doing, managing it with two people was super impressive. And it's really a bummer to see it go. It's sad that we couldn't have at least kept it around in the International Canoe Federation races. So the non-Olympic races that we have, like World Cups and World Championships. It's a bummer that we couldn't keep it, but I think a lot of the sport is kind of contingent on the funding that it gets from the International Olympic Committee and like the National Olympic Committees. So when that funding dried up, I think it was pretty hard for them to sustain it.
Yeah, it's always unfortunate when sports disappear because of financial considerations, right? I mean, yeah, you would think that with the money generated in some areas, there should be enough to reshuffle some to the for now less popular sports. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily how it works.
It's not the case. No, it's sad. And it's sad too, because like there are non-Olympic disciplines of paddling. So other disciplines of paddling, we have downriver. This is, it's recognized by the International Canoe Federation. So we still have World Cups and World Championships for it. They often take place at the same course and the same time as the Slalom World Championships. So we'll kind of have like a big event with everybody doing their runs. And the downriver is no gates. They're like these long, more narrow boats. They look kind of like a beefed up version of what you see on the flatwater sprint kayaking. And you're just sprinting down whitewater as fast as possible. They have short courses, which are like the length of a slalom course. And then they have long courses. So it's, like 5-10 miles or whatever. They'll have like these longer distance courses as well. And that's, non-Olympic discipline, but still has all the different events. So you would think that they could keep C2 in the same boat, but they're not able to. I think because slalom has that Olympic discipline part of it, that's the focus for our sport, since it's a small sport. And so they focus mostly on that. And, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is disputed, but.
Yeah, that makes sense. My friend Rudy, he's been training flatwater kayak for a few years now. Yeah, and we were able to do some testing with him on the erg indoors.
Yeah,
that was quite fun. I'm pretty sure he'll listen to that one. That'll probably be of interest to him. So that's pretty cool. Going back to I guess the different disciplines, how is the whitewater, I guess, versions of disciplines different than the flatwater ones in terms of the skills that you need, the physical preparation that you have to go through, and the overall training structure?
Yeah, I think you can kind of look at it like the difference of maybe track running versus trail running, or like ultra running. So you have, the trail is, you're traveling around it. The trails are always different. No two are the same. No two runs are the same. Maybe it rained the day before, maybe it didn't. The rocks are changing, like the dirt's changing position from how many people run on it, etc. I think there's no sport that has as many variables as whitewater, where you're mixing, like you have the variable of wind on the gates, and then you have the variable of the actual whitewater just being infinitely different every single time you go down. And so it's hard to compare to anything really, but that's the best comparison I think we have, because if you think about a track sprinter, they're focusing on like the micro movements of one movement. It's just about their stride. Every little piece of the stride of their running stride is what they're focusing all of their energy on. Whereas slalom, you have your basic forward stroke, just like the sprinters. But these sprinters, they're not focusing on like turning strokes. They're not turning the boat hardly at all. Marathon sprint, they do. It's much longer courses, so there is some turning involved. But it's no, like on a dime, their boats are not designed to do that. So this is kind of like, slalom is kind of like the F1 and of the paddling disciplines, and flatwater is like the drag racing.
Yeah,
that meant to go straight as fast as possible.
Exactly.
And then slalom, you're dealing with all of the dynamics of the whitewater, of the course, and you're having to learn a much larger foundation of skills from which you build your style upon.
What's the rule with the gates? Is it shoulder? Is it the hands? How you were talking about the wind?
Yeah, so the rule with the gate, so you have these two poles hanging, and you have to initiate the entire head and a part of the boat. So you can't lean way outside to get the gate with just the head and the boat not go under the gate. So you have to be centered somewhat. You have to be over the middle of your boat, and the pole has to go over your neck. So if it goes over the chin, then that's a miss. And if you miss a gate, that's a 50-second penalty, like 5-0. It's game over. I mean, the event's 80 to 100 seconds. So essentially, it's a disqualification. And then the touches, if you touch a gate, it's a 2-second penalty.
Still not good.
A lot. I mean, 2 seconds. These races are really tight, especially these days. I think the field is just getting tighter and tighter. Everyone's getting better and better, and the courses are becoming a little bit more complicated, a little more technical, a little bit shorter. And the boats are now, like, they used to be 4-meter boats. They're now 3.5-meter boats, and they're designed to turn really quick. They do go fast in a straight line, but not as fast as they used to. So now the focus is a little more on being able to be super dynamic, change your direction and your speed really quickly.
Is there ever any contentious calls when it comes to passing gates, or is it a pretty?
Yeah. Oh,
tell me. I want all the details.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, I mean, you've got there's some Peter Kausner's one of my favorite paddlers. But if you watch any of his runs, so many times he gets to the bottom and he's going like, no. Like there's some penalty on the score, and he's like, no, there's no penalty. It's super hard. Like, especially as the paddler who's in the water, you think that you had, you were right there. Like you could feel that everything was right or whatever. And you get to the bottom and there's a 50 and you're, or like you knew you were pushing it, but you weren't sure if it went or not. And so they've gotten pretty good. They have a lot of cameras on the course now. So, and a lot of different angles, and they'll kind of identify like the most risky gates, like the gates that are most likely to be cut. So upstream gates, for example, they're going to have like 3 cameras, 3 angles on almost every upstream gate. And then they have 2 judges on viewing each gate, not like one judge for a gate, but they have a set of gates and there's 2 judges on one section. And so the judges, as the athlete goes down, are calling the touches or the 50s. And then the video review people in the back are like reviewing every single penalty now. Especially, in the smaller races where it's just going off judging and there's no video, then you have it can get really contentious. Because especially if, like, for example, the US team trials, a lot of the time we have like parents judging. And that gets
no bias there. No bias there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to their credit, they do a pretty good job of being unbiased. If anything, they're probably like a little harder on their kid than the others because they have to, not show a bias. But it does, if it gets to the point where it's like, a coach and an athlete are like, there's just no way. And you're going off the word of someone who's like trained-ish. It's a little frustrating. Frustrating.
Yeah, I can understand that. You were talking about
Go ahead.
You were talking about the more extreme version of the sport when you're whitewater kayaking on, not necessarily on the course, but just on a feature that you found on a fall. And I think we watched a Netflix documentary with my wife a few months ago.
Yeah, which one?
It's the one where this dude decided to go down the four.
The 4 different major rivers in, I think
off of a big the Himalayas somewhere. It was It was pretty extreme. It was
Yes.
awesome.
The guy's name is it's Scott something, right?
I forget. I honestly couldn't remember, but it was it was
super bad. I should definitely know that. That was a great documentary. That was really cool. There's a few that have come out now. Noria Newman also did a great documentary.
Okay.
I think it covered her. She's like a super stout. She's Red Bull whitewater kayaker. She used to do slalom, was very good in slalom, and just got bored with it, and went on to doing extreme paddling, and got super extreme. Like she's running some super intense stuff like by herself too. So kind of going on these like sort of it's an area where people get a little bit upset sometimes. They're like, that's overly risky. It's unnecessary risk. But to these paddlers, or like to Alex Honnold for free soloing, there's something about the risk that's inherent that like makes it what they love about it, and so you have people just like that in paddling too.
I was gonna actually ask how that's viewed in the community. I guess the competitive community in the slalom and in the other disciplines. Is it like tolerated? Are they part of the same group, quote unquote, as you guys?
It's a good question. It's a good question because it's something that's talked about. Slalom and whitewater extreme paddling they don't mix as much as you would expect them to. In the US, I'd say that they do mix quite a lot. Most people grow up just doing paddling, like they stay at a summer camp or kayak school or something. There's just not that many slalom clubs. And then if they find that they want to try out some competition, they'll kind of seek that out, and they'll find, oh, slalom is a thing. Oh, there's this club that I can go and try it out, or like, our club like offers a summer camp program for kids to come and try to get into it. And so that's usually how it goes. So they already have some experience doing some other whitewater. Whereas in Europe, there's such a density of clubs over there, like in the Czech Republic and Slovenia and Slovakia and France. Like they just have tons and tons of clubs. Mm-hmm. And so the kids will grow up like paddling exclusively slalom boats, exclusively on artificial whitewater, and not even really like touch a creek boat or a freestyle kayak or any of these other types of boats, or try any of these other types of paddling. I mean, eventually you're going to try some of it, and most people will get into some sort of creeking or whatever, but it is, it's surprising how few slalom paddlers actually go and enjoy the other part of paddling as well. Like for me, I have to do it. Every once in a while, I need to go and just like have some fun on the river, where I'm exclusively just there to just like recreate and like, get an adrenaline rush and have some fun. Because that's like totally why I fell in love with the sport in the first place. And then I also, as like an athletic standpoint, I kind of fell in love with the idea of pushing my limits like all the way, like seeing how far I can take this sport. From like a physiological perspective and a mental perspective, rather than from like a risk perspective.
Right. Yeah. Cause it's always that element too, when you're pushing the boundaries and thinking about the great late Shane McConkey, for those who follow skiing at all, or wingsuit base jumping for that matter, because that's the way he went and he combined both. And unfortunately isn't here anymore, but it's there. You can push those sports very, very far, I guess, as far as you can tolerate it, or not.
Push to the brink of death. I mean, that's what's happening these days a lot. I think we're losing more paddlers Maybe that's not true. It's always been a sport where there's a loss in the community that just happens. It's like it's I want to be hesitant saying that it's an accepted part of the sport. Like people expect it's an expected part of the sport.
Okay.
But I do think that's dangerous. I think that making it acceptable for that to happen undermines like what we are able to control and the types of risk management behaviors that we can learn and safety behaviors and stuff like that. Just, proper safety practice. It's to not overlook those things and to take them seriously and still be smart about the way that we push the limits of the sport. I'd say like the design of the boats has gotten really good. It's modern creek or good. It's gotten really easy. These modern creek.
What was hard about it before and how is it now?
Well, it's the actual like design of the boat and how it works in the water. So there's something called a rocker, which is like how much the front of the boat lifts up. And the old boats were very, very flat, long, and they only came up a little bit on the ends. So they were going like quite fast, but they weren't skipping over the hydraulics or, when you have a waterfall, then you have like this recirculating portion of the water at the bottom. And these modern boats, even if you don't land totally flat, like even if you land like this, there's so much rocker on the front that they go like, and they skip out from it like that. And that allows you to get away from the dangerous part of the whitewater, the recirculating part of the whitewater that can hold you and retain you. And so it's kind of made kayaking like harder levels of whitewater more accessible to people of lower levels. And I think people are skipping many steps in the learning process. Like I think these boats are fantastic for people that have a super solid base in fundamentals and have gone through all of the proper training and all the proper steps on the river to get to where they are and are like, true, masters of their discipline. It's a really useful tool. But I actually think that it's kind of dangerous for people who are starting out to start out learning in a boat that's so easy to paddle. I mean, like I don't even like paddling them because I don't feel the water at all. It's just you're going over everything. You're not like engaging with the water. You're not deep enough in it. There's too much volume. And so I like paddling my slalom boat because it has like a super small stern that you can put underwater and you can engage with the water in like a 3-dimensional way. And it's way sportier. It's harder and it's more fun. Like once you learn how to use it properly, it's way more engaging than these like really big clunky boats that just kind of like go over everything. But people are learning in them and they're running shit in them that they probably shouldn't be.
Yeah, like you said, you need the fundamentals first and be sitting in not that a Formula One is easy to drive per se, but it's like sitting in a Formula One when you just got your learners. It's something's bound to go wrong at some point.
Yeah, but I mean, the difference there, I'd say it's almost not like that though. Like I think a slalom kayak, like putting a brand new paddler in a slalom kayak and then putting them on big, hard whitewater would be like getting in an F1 because someone that can't properly time the clutch and stuff is not driving an F1. It's just not going to go.
I was looking for a better analogy in my mind, but yeah, F1 is not easy to drive by any stretch, but you could do damage with it.
Yeah, you could do damage. That's true. That's true. Yeah, it's like giving someone a really stupid car that is extremely fast. It's like putting someone with their learners in a Tesla Plaid and saying, have fun. 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds, have a blast. I mean, they're going to crash that thing so fast, they won't know what hit them.
Thanks for adjusting my analogy. That's a better one. Going back to the unknown nature of your slalom courses, does your more extreme whitewater endeavors help at all in terms of knowing how to learn patterns of the water, knowing what to look for? Is there any transfer for you, even from a mental perspective between those?
Yeah, I would say a majority of the transfer actually goes from slalom into whitewater because slalom teaches you like to really hone the fundamentals and just get super good at kayaking. Because, the slalom course that we train on here in DC that I train on most of the year is bordering on flat. I mean, it's really light whitewater. It's just a little wave train, has some eddies on the side, super basic whitewater. But we're practicing like class 5 moves on class 2 whitewater. So you're learning to do things that like, if you put someone in like a good creek boater in a boat and ask them to do some of the combinations of gates that we're doing, there's no way that they'd be able to make it. Like they're really challenging. So you learn how to get really technically precise on easy whitewater, and then apply that to bigger whitewater. I mean, the courses that we do, some of the artificial courses are quite big whitewater. They have no inherent risk whatsoever. It's a swimming pool practically, but it's technically difficult, especially with the combinations that we're doing on top of that. So I think if you take a slalom paddler and you put them into like a technical creeking situation, they're more prepared technically than many of the creek boaters are. They just need to learn the boat and learn like the whatever the differences in technique that comes specifically to free fall or bigger whitewater. And once they learn that, then they can be some of the best technical paddlers in the world. The side that you don't get from slalom is this whole like dealing with adrenaline. Well, that's not true, actually. In the racing environment, you do learn how to deal with adrenaline and calming your mental state and whatnot. But it's because of it's a different reason. The source is different. It's not fear for life or like fear of injury. It stems from competition. So like the way that we get adrenaline from any competition. But I do think there's a parallel there. And I think that like exposure to large whitewater and executing difficult moves on large whitewater helps your ability to like cope with the adrenaline of a race much better. I think it makes you mentally stronger. So that's the only transfer that I get, I would say, from the big whitewater to slalom is the mental aspect. But then from slalom to the big whitewater, like all of the technical, I mean, everything translates over to that for me.
Can you talk about a week of training for you in terms of how much do you spend in the boat, how much of it is done outside of the boat, and what do you do for your physical prep online or dry training? I think that's how we call it.
Yeah, we have land training.
Training.
Yeah, so on water, I usually do. It depends on the week a little bit, but most weeks there's at least like 3 days that are 2 a day on the water, and then 3 days that are 1 a day, or it could be 4 days that are 2 a day and 2 days that are 1 a day. Then I have 1 day off weeks. Sundays are off. And then in addition to those, what was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 10 sessions on the water, 10, 11 sessions on the water. Then I also have 3 sessions in the gym and then 2 to 3 sessions running. Depends on the block that we're in. If we're in like an aerobic block, then it'll probably be 2 longer runs. And if we're in a like more like interval block, shorter distance, higher intensity, then I'll go for like 2 or 3 runs, but at a higher pace, kind of doing interval running. Mm-hmm. So that's what the week looks like. But then, the type of workouts that you're doing on the water varies greatly. We'll do our style of training on the whitewater or on the type of water that we have. It's a lot of interval training, a lot of resistance training where we take like a string that's like a circuit string that has tennis balls on it. So you can put as many balls under the boat as you want to like increase the resistance. We've also started playing with some system that we can release that quickly. So we can do contrast sprints. So kind of like the way the track runners use parachutes, we'll do like a sprint with a certain amount of resistance, release it, and then a sprint without immediately after. So that's been pretty fun. I think that's actually pretty effective at increasing power. I like that training a lot. But yeah, a lot of the training we do is like physical, and then we do some technical training. So, during off season, it's probably just like twice a week, we'll do a technical session where you're just focusing on like challenging moves and honing like a specific technical aspect that you want to work on or whatever. And then we'll do some aerobic sessions. So like longer duration aerobics, sustained effort, 60 minutes or whatever with a few sprints included. It's about it. So a lot of it's kind of funny. And as a coach, it's kind of hard for me to get this through to my kids. Sometimes they're like, why are we doing these longer, like super intense intervals when our event's only, 80, 90 seconds? I'm like, well, you're actually training to train. Like, I need you to finish this block of training so that in the next one, you don't bonk, like so that you can actually train hard every session and get what you're supposed to get out of the training. It's not about the race right now. It's about you actually being able to train a high enough volume to have the same amount of like hours in the boat as the next guy in Europe that you're trying to go compete against.
That's probably the best message about low intensity training. And that's the one I try to communicate to a lot of CrossFitters that I work with as well. And you said it perfectly. Zone 2 training is not to perform better directly. It's to tolerate more volume, produce more intensity, which then is going to allow you to perform better. It's like
Yeah.
it's the training for your sports training, and then your sports training makes your competition results.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I think it takes, like, without a guy, like someone specifically telling you that, it takes a while to realize that. Like, okay, why is it that these people are doing such a high volume of work over here? Like, if their event is just 100, 100-meter sprint, shouldn't you just do a bunch of 100-meter sprints and get really good at it? No, that's not how it works. Like, you can't just if you do a 100-meter sprint, if that's the only training you do all the time, you're going to have tendonitis, you're going to blow out your knees, you're going to just mess yourself up, I believe.
Yeah,
it's not, you can't do that to your body. Maybe you can when you're a teenager, but as soon as you get to like 23 or so, your body starts going like, okay, we need to actually take care of ourselves now. It's hard.
Out of curiosity, do you guys use any grinders or arm ergometers for conditioning outside of the water?
Yeah, so I had an ergometer for a few years that I was using like in college. Because the university I went to was like 45 minutes to an hour from the river. So it just didn't make sense. I couldn't always go to the river every day if I had to like study for a test. So I had an erg that I was using on the balcony of my dorm. It sufficed. It was fine. It's not the best training for slalom because slalom is so much more about like the turning and the feeling in the boat and whatnot. But for the physical part of it, it's fine. You have to be a little careful because it can actually alter the stroke technique a little bit.
What about I was thinking more of the cycle ergometer, the arm one, where it's just like literally pedals.
Gotcha. No, I haven't ever used one of those once, just because we have the sprint kayak ergometers. Like for testing and whatnot, we always have access to those. Most of our training camps, we have access to them. And then that's what I had access to in college. I was able to bring one to the university.
It's probably what we were using with Rudy for his testing.
Yeah,
but I was kind of thinking about just a general conditioning purpose, right? With again the pattern that wouldn't be the one of the kayak, so you couldn't necessarily mess it up, and also not to overload the pattern because I don't know if you guys get overuse from too much paddling. I guess that's the thing too.
It is a thing. I struggled. I actually last summer. So yeah, not this past summer, but the one prior. Of 2021 was our Olympic qualifying, and then the Olympic summer, obviously. And leading into, so we had the Olympic qualifiers at home, and then we had the final Olympic qualifier was in Prague at the first World Cup of the season. And Olympic qualifiers at home went quite well. I was in, that's the other thing. Only one person goes per nation in the sport to the Olympics. So it's not the full national team. It's not top three.
Oh, wow.
It's just one. And that's one if you qualify the national quota. You don't necessarily, you have to qualify the national quota at World Championships for the US. And then the next season you compete individually for that spot to earn that quota spot. And
that's a big cut.
It's a big cut. It's tough. It's really, the Olympics is the hardest race to compete in and the easiest one to win because there's the fewest competitors. You like the Czech Republic has like their top 3 K1 are probably all in the top 10 in the world. Yeah. So any one of them could take a podium at the Olympics, but you just have one in there. So it's easier to medal, but it's harder to get there. And so anyway, the qualifiers went really well in the States for me. And then I went over to Europe about a month and a half early to train on the course and get time. And within 3 days, I just started having like an excruciating pain in my wrist, like right in here. And I ended up like just over the course of like a week developing horrible tendonitis in my wrist.
Oh, wow.
Just awful. I mean, it came out of the blue. I had never had an issue with my wrists in the past, never had an issue with my forearms, nothing. No tendonitis in the elbows, nothing in the shoulders, like fine. I had neck issues, but that was all. And so like going to a ton of PTs, getting injections and everything, trying to calm it down, nothing worked. I ended up having to take like 5 months out of the boat and then work very slowly back up into a training pace by like end of October, beginning of November last year, and then had a super successful winter of training and my best season yet. But that overuse, that was my first experience with like a serious overuse injury and totally changed the way that I look at like how you have to balance your training and your rest and how important the rest is and what other activities you can do to like continue to load the volume while you give your body rest from the parts that you're working all the time in the boat.
Is that why running? Is that why you use the running for conditioning so that you don't just add more upper body volume?
Yeah, exactly. I think swimming would be a great option. Just the pools in my area are super expensive. so I don't swim. But I like running, and I think that like having some stimulation for the legs is probably a good thing. It's such a big muscle group. I mean, one of the main issues we found, like I ended up working with a great integrative therapist here at home that helped me to fix this forearm issue I was having because nothing was working. And one of the things we noticed, like my glutes were underactive, my hips weren't strong enough. So working on all of that's like the pelvic hip complex, getting that strength up was really important for me. So I found like, all right, trail running is a great way to like work on stabilization of the hips and everything. I don't like running just straight, but I'll do trail running on like tighter dynamic, like single tracks and stuff. And that works quite well for me. And I enjoy it. So it's good rest conditioning and stuff.
Better scenery too.
Way better scenery. Yeah. And we have some really good, like people don't think of like nature when they think of DC. We have one of the most epic national parks, like 15 minutes from DC. These like huge waterfalls and a huge canyon river that like you can do these runs like right along the canyon. It's awesome. It's super out. Like people don't go. Like people from DC have never been. And it just blows my mind.
Yeah, it's probably the same here. I mean, I left Switzerland years ago, 10 years ago, came back 3 years ago, and since I've come back, I've just realized how many gems there are just on my doorstep. And that, I was too busy drinking with the rugby guys when I was younger, and I could have just literally just drove to a different location every weekend and seen something amazing. But I guess we learn slowly.
Yeah. People, we figure it out. And once you have exposure to it, it's like, oh my God, like I've been missing out. But it's like, no, dude, just like take advantage of it now. You got it.
Yeah,
You got it. But
exactly.
yeah, I like the cross training part of my sport. I like training in general. I like the fun parts of my sport too, but I think that like I'm probably more of a process person than I am a results person. So like my thing has always been like I want to put 100% of what I'm able to into the sport until I feel that I reach a plateau. Like my actual I know that there are plateaus within progression, but until I feel like I've like okay, like I've reached my potential, like I'm comfortable with this level. It's not about like one specific result for me. It's not about being the world champion. It's not about just going to the Olympics. Like that's some people, they just want to go to the Olympics and they quit. For me, it's not all about that. Like I don't really care. Like it'd be cool to go. I don't really care if I go because for me, it's just about like the process of like getting my body and my mind to the most like the highest potential that I can get it to and seeing what that is individually, like non-judgmentally. And yeah, for me, that's what I get the most enjoyment out of. So I really enjoy like the hard work. I think it's really fun. I think it's cool to see what your body can do and like see where its limits are. Like even the injury and coming back from that was one of the coolest processes that I've gotten to go through. I got to use like a lot of my studies from exercise science and like really dive back into it with like like a purpose. Yeah, like purpose that was really important for me, like fixing my body and then getting to work with a bunch of different PTs and professionals on like trying to understand what was going on and how I can like train for longevity rather than just training for like that day, trying to just like destroy myself as much as possible, looking at the long-term goals. And it was like a really cool lesson.
Yeah, and like you said, it's probably telling that you took 5 months off and then had the best season yet.
Yeah. To realize that I could take that much time off. And as long as I kept I think a big part of it though, I've seen paddlers take a bunch of time off, come back and not be technically like acute. Like they just kind of had lost that edge. But I think since I was coaching the entire time, I was surrounded by the sport and arguably I had like more confidence in my mental part of like choosing like this is for sure the fastest line or like this is the best approach for this skate or this combination. Like using that outsider perspective and having that be so clear in my mind. When I got back in the boat, I had much more of like a coach's approach to my in my own mind rather than just like tunnel vision, listening to the coach and then trying to perform. It was much more of like an outsider perspective, and I found it was really helpful. I think
which must be huge for your sport. Maybe different than other sports where you just have to pedal to the metal and go for it. Where you have so much decision making in those in that minute and a half to every single movement is going to have an influence on your position a fraction of a second later, and then your ability to be fast or not to pass that gate or the other.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's full of like split second decisions and like gut reactions. It has to be instinctual when you race. You got to be able to let go and be instinctual. You can't be thinking about doing something special that you hadn't been doing in practice. Like you have to just trust that, all right, what I've done is enough. All of the experience, like I've banked all the knowledge, it's all here. And now it's time to just like let go and see what I can do. On this day, whatever I can do is what I can do. I can't do anything more than that. Just go. But then like that release of like the pressure and just saying like, all right, let's see what can happen, allows you to be ultra present and reacting to every little thing and just, letting your mind do the work on its own, like kind of subliminally, and just putting power on the body and seeing like how it moves. And I've found like that's a take that I started using more in the last like 2 seasons, I would say. That before I was like push all the way, like grind super hard through the whole run, and it was way too intense. Like I would have like really, really fast sections and then blow out just one gate combination or something. It was far too inconsistent. So yeah, like you have to have a clear enough mind and be confident enough in your abilities to just let yourself focus and do what you're able to do in practice.
Yeah, that's a great description. What areas of your training, like you said, you're not only an athlete but you're a coach. What areas of your own training and of training in general are you the most interested in nowadays? What topics are you digging into, trying to understand better?
It changes a lot. I'm pretty interested in the lifting side of things right now. Just like trying to learn more about it. I'm finishing up like the NASM CPT course just to kind of like broaden my knowledge and kind of open up another opportunity for work. I can do some personal training outside of my discipline. So I'm interested in that right now. I'm also interested in that just because I've always struggled with putting on mass and stuff. I have a super high metabolism and I eat a ton of food. I mean, I eat an exorbitant amount of food and really struggle to put on weight. Even when I'm doing like all the gym and stuff, I think it might have something to do with the volume being too high, which is just kind of comes with the way that our training style is in the sport. But I'm interested in that right now. I'm also super interested in interval training and the different applications, like changing different stimuluses within it. So the intensity of it or the resistance on it. So working with the tennis balls and like the release tennis balls has been pretty interesting for me. I would like to, I don't know if there is like a comprehensive course on just all of the intricacies of interval training. I know there's one guy, I can't remember his name, who wrote a book. He did a lot of research on interval training, and they kind of wrote the book on it, explaining like the breakdown of all the different types, all the different ratios, and then how it applies the best to different length events and whatnot.
Is it Martin Buchheit who wrote the Science of HIIT Training? I think it might be.
It might be that.
In that ballpark.
I don't remember the name whatsoever. Even if I heard it, I wouldn't remember it. But I've read a few articles from him, and my coach has sent me a bunch of material from him that I've read through. But I would like to learn more about that. That's always interested me. It's something that I play with within my own training that I get a lot of engagement from. But it would be cool to like learn about it in an academic setting and then try to apply that. Other than that, go ahead.
I was gonna ask about the psychological, mental side. I guess you've had.
I was just about to say that. Yeah.
Okay,
like
go for
other
it.
than the physical sides, I've ever since I was in school, I took a sports psych class. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it that much. I didn't enjoy our normal psych 101 class that we took. But the sports psych class, I was super engaged. I really enjoyed it. And so I started reading a lot of sports psychology books because I think that was something that I struggled with in my own training. I recognized that like my level of practice was so much higher than my level of performance. And I knew that the only thing blocking that was my mental. So I started doing a lot more research on that, listening to a lot of podcasts. I read one book called, I think it was called Bigger, Faster, Stronger. And that kind of touched on like a lot of different aspects of sport, but one of them was touching on a lot of the psychological parts. And then after a season that I was distraught after, I had like, I think I placed 41st twice. and the cutoff to make semifinals was 40th. And so I had 2 41st finishes, and then I missed the semifinals in my last under 23 world championships, which I should have definitely been able to be like in the top 20 for that race. So after that race, I was super frustrated with myself, and my coach was like, "Hey, read this book," and it was called oh shoot, it's like blowout. It's like when you blow out. What's another word for that in sport? Not bonk, but like shoot. I'll find it and I'll send you the link so you can put it in the show notes. But yes, it's a great book. I have it sitting in my room right now, and it's touched on all of the aspects of like mental performance and what creates a high mental performer. And we're talking in sport and business and in any field, but it mostly touches on sport. And so I found that to be really interesting, and I've been able to I've read through it really slowly and like taken a lot of notes on how that applies to the sport of slalom. And how I can like use that when I'm coaching my kids, like how I can teach them these lessons so that they're not learning it like years and years down the road, but that they can have it in the forefront of their mind to begin with, and try to like base more of their practices and like their morals when it comes to like why and how they train on these like better mental practices. So I think for them, it's really tough. Like I think it was definitely easier for people my age. I think now with like TikTok and like social media being super prevalent, and their focus has changed a lot onto like trying to look good or, trying to like look really strong or look really fast or put on this facade, but they want it to happen like that. Like they want this like super fast return. They don't want to like put in these like really long hours of work that no one sees and no one cares about in order to achieve like the look or whatever that they're like going for. So that's been an ongoing struggle, is like getting them to buy into and understand like the process.
How have you been able to communicate that? It is hard, and it's always, there's always two sides to any coin, and social media is just that. It's for me, it's an opportunity to exchange, to learn from other professionals and athletes like yourself. There's also the drawbacks, obviously, and like you said, for developing minds and brains, it's not necessarily always easy to navigate those waters. How do you are you able to help them in that regard?
I definitely try. I understand my position, so I'm not always there like lecturing them on like how to use social media or whatever. But what I do, I know that sport naturally teaches you a lot of the things that you need to know to have a strong mental psyche, to be healthy inside and out, to be confident. And so I try to just get them to focus properly on their sport and to think about sport in the right way. So to not just focus on the results, to focus on the process, to not be looking always to what other people's successes are and judging your own successes off that, but rather like individually looking at your runs from time to time. So for example, like a lot of workouts, I won't give them all of the times openly. I'll tell them their times to the individual so that they're focusing on like bettering their own runs and not how they're comparing to the other athlete. And then there are times where you need competition, so you add that in, but trying to just kind of like balance these different aspects of it. The biggest part that I try to push, that I think I've had the least success with pushing, is consistency in their training and long-term buy-in to the programs. At their age and with their family, it also has to do with the parents. If the parents have to buy into it as well, and if the parents don't see the vision or they don't see the purpose, then they'll take their kids on a 1-month vacation in the middle of winter. And I have no control over what they do during that vacation. I can send them training programs. I can, check in with them. But at the end of the day, if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. You can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So I've had a lot of frustration with kids that make a ton of headway. They're super, super motivated. Everything's going really well. Then family vacation happens and they're checked out for a month. They come back, and then the only sentiment that they feel is frustration that they're not where they were, and that the other kids that have been there the whole time are now ahead of them. And so then it causes another month of lagging behind as they slowly make up that progress with a half-hearted mentality. And then finally, when they do feel like they're catching back up, okay, then they get a burst of motivation again, or it's springtime and team trials is right around the corner, but it's too late. So
Yeah,
trying to
it's
get
2 months
them to,
gone. Yeah,
it's 2 months, and 2 months is huge at their age and their stage of development for the sport. 2 months is a lot. I think like the most you can do is show up, hone your fundamentals, like not get bored with the basics. But like do what you're told as far as like the program, like do the right intensity, do the cool downs, do the warm-ups, and then do it on a consistent basis. And if you do all those things, your rate of success is going to be quite high, I think, in the sport. The other nice thing about this sport is that it's not super determined by your genetics. Like we have really tall guys that weigh, close to 200. We have short guys that are 140 pounds, and they're all competing within a tenth of a second. You got all different body types, and
that's crazy.
it's crazy. But it has to do with strength to weight ratio of this sport,
Yep.
and so you can compensate. People can compensate by being really strong, or they can compensate by being like finessing, and having a super like high level of technique. So that's one of the things I love about it and that's why I'm also like so hesitant to have these kids comparing themselves to one another if they have different physiology. Saying, look, you're going to have a different road to mastery here, and if you're not like as strong and explosive of a person, you're not going to find success in the younger part of your sport. You're going to find success once you're in your like mid-20s and you do naturally develop some strength and power and you've like mastered the technical aspects. And then the person that was focusing just on their strength and compensating for it in the younger part of their sport will have to have a revelation as far as the technical side of it goes before they actually compete for like a top spot at a senior level. It can be a detriment, actually. I think that it's probably easier to coach a kid who's underpowered and has to learn the technical stuff in order to keep up with the other kids than it is the other way around. So, but getting a kid to see that is really, really challenging.
Why would you say it's harder this way than the other way around?
Why is it harder to coach somebody who's strong than someone who's a little weaker? It's because people compensate, and it's super tempting. It's super tempting to use your strength, especially in kayak. It's really obvious. I mean, if you look at like the technique of a forward stroke, for example, I have a kid that just started paddling like a couple months ago with our team, really strong. I mean, like I think he's 16 or 17, and he has a physiology like mine, a very mature physiology, really quick in a straight line, but terrible technique. I mean, he could be so much faster in a straight line if he were to change some of the technical components of his forward stroke. But it's hard to get them to buy into that concept when they're beating everyone else off the line.
It's crazy. I find the same thing with rowing and CrossFit. I spent a decent amount of time on. I never went on the water, but I've spent many hours on indoor rowers and did a couple indoor competitions. And so I have a decent understanding of how to pull, or not even to pull. It's actually a push. But in CrossFit, everybody's pulling like mad. And you see, bent elbows everywhere and people's arms blowing up when that's actually the opposite of what you want. But again, if they're doing well, why would they listen to you? There's definitely 20 to 40 watts on the table. I mean, it's there if they just, took a couple one step back.
20 to 40 watts and take the freaking efficiency into your next event and then kick more ass in the next event.
That too. Exactly. Yeah. But it's
a huge part of it.
And then there's also the other thing is that everybody's doing it like that. You look at how they ski, you look at skiing technique, and they're all doing butterfly skiing, and everybody knows that the straightest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but they still go in a circle, and nobody cares because they're all doing it and they're all pulling, to their socks, and trying to tell them that actually with about a half of that pull, you could produce more power and be more efficient. It's tough when they can do it, right?
It's really tough. And I think this kind of goes into, especially when you're looking at youth development, this goes into when they hit puberty too. And it's in team sports, it's a lot more challenging than it is in individual sports. Because with an individual sport, like I can just focus on what that kid's able to do now, and that's fine. And I can, it's easier to like divvy up my time equally amongst each of the individuals with different training sessions and whatnot. When it comes to team sports and you're selecting kids for your team for success, the kids that hit puberty first, at that age, the strength is going to be the reason for their success. And it's going to be successful when you compare it. If they're like a freak and they've got a lot of strength at the age of 14, and then you got, and they're 6 foot, and then you've got a kid who's like, 5'5", and super skinny, he can't put on weight to save his life, he's not going to be of use as far as winning games for you. So do we pick him or do we pick the other? But if that kid that's 5'5" and hasn't grown yet sticks with it and tries to keep up with the kids who are really strong, he's going to do so by technique. He's going to learn really good, let's say basketball. He's going to learn really good dribbling technique, really good agility. He's going to get really good at like his long shots because he's not jumping for shots. He's definitely not going to be doing dunks. So he's going to work on all of the other fundamentals. And then when he gets to add strength to that down the road, when he does hit it at the age of 18, 19, he'll be a beast. But if he's not been able to be on the varsity team and get good coaching for all that time, then maybe he won't be. It'd be missed talent.
Yeah, talent development is a huge topic, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I had a great chat a while back with Ben Simmons, who's a two-time Olympian bobsleigh athlete for the UK, and telling me about he was in track when he was younger, and he had this friend of his who obviously didn't get picked because he just wasn't good enough at that time.
Yeah.
But then went on to run one of the fastest 100s or 200s in the UK ever just a few years later, right? And I'm pretty sure he was a bobsleigh athlete as well. I mean, those guys are quite impressive from a raw, speed and power standpoint. But yeah, it was the whole discussion around, youth talent development and selection and scouting of when do you draw the line, right? Because at some point you need to show results now. You can't say I'm banking on that kid in 5 years he's going to be good. It's got to be no. He already has to have potential now. Otherwise, you're kind of putting your neck out there too, right?
That's true, but I think, and maybe I'm saying that because I come from like a technical skill-based sport. I think that you can see mastery of fundamentals and you can identify when it's a lack of force that's keeping them from moving forward. But when they have like a comprehension for reading whitewater and stuff like that is visible. If you know what you're looking for and you have like a really clear definition of what the fundamentals are that you build a base from and that you can build a successful athlete off of, I think like there are fewer kids that show a really high talent in that area than there are the kids that show high talent and strength. But then, for example.
That I 100% agree with you. The tricky part probably is then that people with your eye aren't the ones making the decision.
That's true sometimes. Yeah, that's true. or in the example of team sport, that they don't want to sacrifice the success of a team and sacrifice the motivation that a lot of the more fit or like stronger, higher level kids would get from winning. They don't want to sacrifice that just so that they can develop some kids who are underpowered. I understand the predicament for sure. It's definitely a catch-22.
It's tricky.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's tough. But in individual sport, I think it's a little easier to balance. And that's one thing my coach has always said, and it's something I really respect about him. My coach, Sylvan, he was the Olympic coach for the U.S. for a while. And then he's now the club coach with me. So he and I are the club coaches for this local club. And he coaches the senior team group and then a lot of the other development crews as well. But he always said that in the sport of slalom, if you stick with it long enough and you actually put in effort and you have some natural ability, like he doesn't neglect the fact that there does exist some amount, but you have some natural ability and you put in all of the time and the effort that it takes, you can become successful. Like you can have some success in the sport. It's sticking with it long enough. And it may be like that you have to stick with it 5 years longer than the other guy, or that you hit your peak, 5 years later than the other guy, or you have to deal with 5 more injuries than the other guy, or whatever it is. But if you stick with it long enough, you can have a successful career. And you can also, you will learn a lot from it. Like you're going to get a lot out of the sport. He recognizes how beneficial it is to these kids and to the rest of your life. And I feel the same way.
What are your next big competitions coming up?
So there's actually a World Cup happening this weekend, and then one the following that I'm not attending. We have to fund everything ourselves. And yes, we don't have any funding. I have one sponsor, this York Ag. It's like an ag company from my hometown. That they've made it possible for me to continue training and competing the way that I do. But I still have to make some financial decisions. So I'm not going to these last 2 World Cups. There's 5 of them. I already did 3, and I did World Championships in the beginning of the summer. And then the Olympic qualifiers are going to be in London the Olympic qualifiers for the national quota spot, not for the individual spot, but for the national quota will be next summer in London. And that course doesn't allow non-British paddlers to train there very often. So we have a 2-week training stint that's happening September 6th to the 19th. And then there's a race, just like a ranking race. It doesn't have a specific title or whatever, but it's just a race that will be there. So I have to go there to prepare for the Olympic qualifiers for next year because I think all 3 of the U.S. men are going to go there actually because we need a spot. We need to qualify the spot first. So that's like first order of business, qualify the spot as a team, like working together to like try to get that spot. And then next order of business is try to kick their asses.
I like that plan. That sounds like a good plan. Tyler, if people want to follow your adventures moving forward, where can they find you online?
Yeah, you can find me. I'm most active on Instagram. It's at Tyler_Utus, which is UTHUS_Westfall. I can send you the handle too. You can throw it in the show notes or whatever.
It's in the show notes already. So people go click on the link, follow Tyler, and thanks for coming on, man. That was a fun conversation. So I learned a lot about your sport.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it, man.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right, see ya.
Listening to this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, please take a few moments to leave a written review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. If you want to watch this episode again, you can find the full video recording on my YouTube channel. You'll also find hundreds of hours of free content, all my podcasts, my thoughts of the day, structured presentations, and more. So don't wait, go subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.